The night my husband told me he was divorcing me, it was supposed to be our anniversary celebration. The steakhouse lights were low, the kind that make everything look softer, even betrayal. His mother sat beside him, smiling like she'd already won. But when he said, "I'm leaving you," I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I smiled because he had no idea I'd already sold the apartment he lived in for free, and the money was sitting safely where he'd never touch it. By the time he took his next breath, the power had already shifted. The evening began with the kind of stillness that feels like the universe holding its breath, an omen I didn't recognize until it was too late. That tiny round table in Valentino's steakhouse, the one with the red leather booths and steaks priced like rent, had always been his favorite. Our 5-year anniversary dinner was supposed to feel nostalgic. 5 years since I walked down the aisle in that discounted lace dress I'd altered myself. 5 years since I believed love was enough to build a future on. Adrian insisted we celebrate in the same place he proposed, swearing it would be sentimental. I believed him. I still believed a lot back then. He raised his champagne, wearing that half-smirk he saved for moments when he thought he controlled the narrative. His mother, Celeste, perched beside him like a crow who'd already smelled victory. She had that satisfied little smile, one she usually reserved for gossip or funerals. Then Adrian dropped the hook he'd been rehearsing for months. "Thank you," he said, syrupy sweet, "for letting me live in your apartment for free for 5 years, while you paid for, well, everything. I've been saving, and now that I finally have enough for my own place, I'm divorcing you." He paused like he expected applause. Celeste actually clapped once before pretending she was fixing her napkin. 5 years of double shifts at the hospital. Time started folding in on itself. Everything I'd carried for years, the double shifts, the swallowed anger, the loneliness beside a man who never noticed me, felt like someone else's memories. Someone I had finally outgrown. 5 years of coming home exhausted and still cooking, still cleaning, still covering every bill, including his phone, his gym, his precious craft beer subscription. But somewhere in those years, something shifted, and I didn't even notice. I stopped waiting for Adrian to change, and I started changing without him. I remember one night, standing in the kitchen at 3 a.m., stirring pasta because he didn't like takeout, and realizing my hands weren't shaking from exhaustion anymore. They were steady, not because I was numb, but because a part of me had already detached, already stepped outside the life he thought I'd stay trapped in. I didn't know it then, but that was the first night I stopped being his caretaker and started becoming my own exit plan. 5 years of him claiming I was lucky he stayed with someone who smelled like antiseptic after midnight shifts. A slow heat crawled up my spine, but my face stayed perfectly composed. I'd practiced this moment. I'd played it out like a movie in my mind over and over. I took a sip of water, never touched the champagne, and smiled a soft, sugar-coated smile. "What a coincidence, Adrian," I said lightly. "I actually have news, too." He leaned in, amused, curious, certain he still held the upper hand. Celeste tilted her head, eyes gleaming. I let the silence settle, just long enough for the waiter to retreat, before delivering my own line, the one I'd been waiting months to use. "I sold the apartment last week, full asking price, cash buyer. They take possession in 14 days. Adrian blinked, once, twice. Celeste's jaw clicked open, then snapped shut. "You what?" he breathed. I kept smiling. "Oh, didn't I mention? My name has always been the only one on the deed. My grandmother left it to me outright. You cried beautifully at the funeral, by the way. Oscar-worthy. His face drained so fast it was almost art. You can't. I already did, I said gently. And the money's sitting in an account you will never touch. And since you insisted we never combine finances, something about not wanting to burden me with your student loans, there's nothing to split. Celeste made a strangled sound and clutched her pearls like she'd just seen the gates of hell open. Oh, Celeste, I added sweetly, you told me last Christmas to cash out while the market is hot. So I did. Thank you. Adrian, the man who always had a comeback ready, now looked like a fish gasping on a dock. But where am I supposed to live? He whispered. I shrugged. You said you saved up for your own place? Congratulations, I said, and just like that, Celeste clutched her chest with the dramatic flair of a soap opera matriarch. I can't breathe, she gasped. Adrian shot up so fast he nearly knocked over the wine glasses. His hands shook as he fumbled for his phone. Mom needs an ambulance. I raised an eyebrow, utterly unmoved. Are you sure? The hospital I work in is literally across the street. I could walk her over faster than an ambulance could wiggle through downtown traffic. That's when her eyes rolled back, not theatrically this time, and she slumped sideways in the booth like a dropped marionette. The restaurant fell silent. Utensils froze mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Adrian's panicked voice trailed through the dining room as he dialed 911 with trembling fingers. I didn't flinch. I lifted my water glass, took a slow sip, and let the calm settle into my bones. Because this chaos, was just the opening act. 5 years I'd played the quiet one. 5 years swallowing insults at family dinners. 5 years pretending not to notice when he borrowed cash from my wallet to feed his hidden savings account. Tonight, on the exact anniversary he tried to break me, I finally took everything back. Everything afterward belonged to the same plan. Not phases, not steps, just one quiet climb out of the life they thought I'd never leave. A rise they never saw coming. But Adrian didn't know the bigger truth. Neither of them did. The apartment wasn't the only thing I'd already sold. There was something else, something worth 10 times more, and when the banks opened in the morning, Phase 2 would ignite. Ambulance lights washed the windows in red and blue streaks. Paramedics rushed in, took one glance at Celeste, slumped like a melted figurine, and launched into their routine. Adrian babbled through tears, insisting she had a heart condition, insisting she needed oxygen, insisting this was somehow my doing. I stood up smoothly, slipped into my coat, and addressed the paramedics with the kind of authority you earn through years of trauma shifts. I'm a trauma nurse at St. Gabriel's, 3rd floor. I'll ride with her and give report. No one questioned me. Scrubs are armor in moments like these. Adrian tried to follow, but I turned and met his eyes with the same sugar-coated tone he'd used on me earlier. You should probably stay here and pay the bill, darling. After all, tonight was your treat, wasn't it? He froze on the sidewalk, mouth open. The maitre d' hovered behind him with the check like poetic punctuation. I climbed into the ambulance and pulled the doors shut myself. 30 seconds into the ride, Celeste jolted awake under the oxygen mask. Her eyes locked on me and widened in sick, perfect terror, as if she'd woken to find the Grim Reaper wearing navy scrubs. Relax, Celeste, I said softly, taking her pulse. Blood pressure's high, but you're fine. You're not dying tonight. Disappointing, I know. She tried to speak. I pressed the mask a little more firmly. Shh, doctor's orders. The ride took 4 minutes. I texted my friend Mara, head of cardiology, on the way. Code Celeste incoming. She replied with a popcorn emoji. Perfect. They rolled Celeste into Bay 3. Adrian burst through the ER doors 2 minutes later, panting, tie crooked, looking like someone had stolen the floor out from under him. Where is she? He barked. Getting an EKG, I said, sipping lukewarm vending machine coffee. Sit down before you're the one who needs a bed. He exploded into threats, lawsuits, accusations, dramatics. Half the waiting room turned to watch. I waited until he ran out of breath. Adrian, I said clearly, the apartment was never yours. You never paid a bill. You have 0 legal claim. And if you keep screaming in my hospital, security will escort you out permanently. Security was already on the move. 2 big guys in polo shirts, the kind who don't negotiate. Adrian deflated, voice dropping to a hiss. This isn't over, Lila. I'll get a lawyer. I smiled. Please do. I'd love to show them the folder. He blinked. What folder? The one with 5 years of bank statements, screenshots, Venmo transfers, and the private investigator's report I had done last year. Turns out cheating on your wife with 3 women and paying for their Airbnbs with her credit card is remarkably easy to document. His knees buckled. One of the security guys steadied him. Sir, you need to leave now. Adrian looked at me one last time, eyes wild and hollow. You planned this every day, he whispered. I didn't correct him. Because he was right. They walked him out. I watched through the glass doors as he stood on the sidewalk, coatless, phoneless, and suddenly very, very alone. Mara appeared beside me, arms crossed, smiling. You're evil. I adore it. Not evil, I said, just finished. She handed me a thick, sealed envelope. The weight of it felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. Inside were the incorporation papers, my company, the staffing agency I'd been building quietly for 18 months. Contracts already signed, a waiting list of 312 nurses ready to join. Real money, life-changing money, money with not a single tie to Adrian. The apartment sale was just my seed. The business was my future. I slipped the envelope into my locker, changed out of my scrubs, and headed back toward the ambulance bay, where Celeste sat upright in her bed, demanding to be discharged. I leaned into the doorway, arms crossed, posture relaxed, like I had all the time in the world. Feeling better, Celeste? I asked, my voice dipped in honey that could rot teeth. She glared at me with the fury of a woman who'd spent her life grooming a prince and accidentally raised a parasite instead. You're a monster. No, I corrected softly. I'm simply the woman who finally stopped financing your son's existence. And tomorrow morning, when that first direct deposit hits my new business account, 6 glorious figures, Celeste, I'm buying the first thing that's ever belonged entirely to me. Her fingers twisted the hospital gown. And what's that? A plane ticket, I said. One way, somewhere warm. And I'm never coming back to this city, or to either of you, ever again. I pivoted toward the hallway. Behind me, she broke. Not fake tears, real ones. Not because she was ill, because she finally understood she'd poured her loyalty and delusion into the wrong man. And the irony? She still didn't know about the masterpiece. The spectacle set to detonate at 9 a.m. The email targeting everyone in Adrian's orbit, his boss, his side women, his mother's choir group. an explosion of truth waiting for an audience. I stepped out into the cold night, pulled my coat tight, and tilted my face toward the stars. Going home wasn't an option. Home didn't exist anymore. The sold sign had gone up days earlier, and the staging company had erased every trace of me. The only things left inside were relics of Adrian's mediocrity. Clothes he never washed, gaming consoles he treasured, and that atrocious leather recliner Celeste gifted him as if it were a throne. He could enjoy the ruins alone. I checked into the Four Seasons, the very hotel Adrian once promised we'd stay in when life got easier. Fitting, then, that I used the credit card he forgot I still had access to, the card he'd maxed out twice on work trips, which were just Vegas weekends with men who were exactly like him. The next statement would be poetic. I ordered room service, a thick-cut steak, an $18 bottle of Bordeaux, and sprawled across a cloud-soft bed watching trash TV like it was a sacrament. It felt illicit, delicious, and absolutely earned. At 6:47 a.m., my phone exploded. First, Adrian, 43 missed calls, 112 texts, oscillating between desperate pleas and unhinged threats. I screenshotted them all for the inevitable restraining order and blocked him. Then came numbers I didn't recognize, his cousins, co-workers, old college buddies, each one delivering the same shocked message. "You didn't actually do that, did you?" I smiled. Yes, I absolutely did. What I never told him was that I remembered the smaller betrayals too, the casual cruelties he forgot he'd even said. The night he mocked my night shifts to his friends. The time he told a coworker I wasn't ambitious enough. The day he used my car for a date and brought it back with another woman's perfume clinging to the passenger seat. Those weren't the wounds that broke me. They were the reminders of who he was and why I had to get out. At exactly 9 a.m., the bomb went off. Subject line, a short anniversary message from Lila to Adrian Cross. I'd crafted it months ago, revised it like scripture, and scheduled it through a service so anonymous it might as well have been carved into stone tablets. 8 paragraphs, every line a detonation. Paragraph 1. A cheerful anniversary greeting, followed instantly by the divorce he meant to ambush me with. Paragraph 2. A scanned copy of the deed with my name, and the closing statement showing $1.38 million transferred into my account. Paragraphs 3 to 6. Screenshots. Merciless, irrefutable screenshots. His so-called business investments. Hotel charges in Miami, Nashville, Austin while I worked night shifts. Venmo payments to Kira, Brinley, and Tasha. Again, she's married. And the $4,200 client dinner that was actually a sunset proposal to Kira. Using the engagement ring he told me he lost on a hike. Paragraph 7. The pièce de résistance. A Google Drive link titled Adrian's Greatest Hits, Audio Edition, 27 recordings, him calling me a cash cow, laughing about how I'd never leave, mocking me to his mother. Crystal clear audio, every timestamp immaculate. Paragraph 8. A gentle benediction, wishing you both the future you deserve. With love, your former ATM. I BCC'd 412 people, his entire contact list, including old professors, co-workers, and every pastor in his mother's prayer network. I'd cloned his cloud backup months before, while he was drunk and careless. By 9:12 a.m., LinkedIn was ablaze. Under Adrian's most recent leadership post, his boss wrote, "Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. HR will contact you shortly. By 9:27, Celeste's prayer chain was begging to know if I needed spiritual protection from her demonic influence. I silenced my phone and took a long steaming shower. When I stepped out, there was a knock. I hadn't ordered anything. I checked the peephole. Adrian stood there, disheveled, blotchy-eyed, holding a wilting bouquet of gas station roses, like they were a peace treaty. I opened the door 4 inches, the chain locked. "Lila," he rasped, "we need to talk. I messed up. Please stop." My voice was flat. "There's nothing to talk about." "I lost my job," he said, voice cracking. "My mom's sedated. Everyone hates me. I have nowhere to go." A familiar ache tugged at my chest, the old reflex to comfort him. But then I remembered the night he told me my father's funeral didn't work with his schedule. My smile sharpened. "Good." I shut the door. He pounded, pleaded, cried. Security arrived in under a minute, dragging him down the hall, roses and all. For years, I'd measured freedom in escape routes. But standing there in the quiet after the chaos, I realized something else. Freedom wasn't running, it was arriving, and I had finally stepped into a life built by my own hands, not held together by apologies and hope. My phone buzzed again, an unknown California number. "Ms. Lila Warren?" a polished voice said. "This is legal counsel for Apex Medical Group. Our board met this morning. We'd like to offer you $8 million for a full acquisition of your staffing agency, plus a consulting contract, $500,000 per year for 3 years. My breath caught. $8 million, plus $1.5 million more. Enough to vanish. Enough to start over. Enough to finally live. I thought of my grandmother, the woman who taught me never to fold for any man. "I'll be on a plane this afternoon," I said. "Have the papers ready in San Francisco tomorrow morning." I booked the 2:15 p.m. flight, first class of course, but before I left the continent, one last task waited. One final bomb. The kind that couldn't be emailed, the kind that needed to be delivered face to face. I landed in San Francisco just after sunrise, but I didn't head straight to the lawyer's office. Revenge has stages, and this one required precision. First stop, shopping, but not the fun, fluttery kind, the surgical kind. I walked into the flagship jeweler Adrian used to drag me past, the one where he'd press his face to the glass and say, "One day, babe." I stepped inside wearing jeans, a hoodie, messy bun, zero makeup. The security guard glanced at me like I'd wandered in by mistake. I ignored him. I went straight to the private salon and told the manager I wanted to see every piece from their iconic collection. She hesitated until I slid my black AMX across the counter, the one I'd activated 2 days earlier under my name only, with a $250,000 limit. Her entire posture changed. 2 hours later, I emerged wearing a 7-carat radiant-cut diamond necklace that sparkled like pure vengeance. I paid by wire transfer and asked them to gift-wrap the empty boxes with enormous satin bows. Let the symbolism breathe. Next stop, the Rolls-Royce dealership in Palo Alto. I test drove a matte black Phantom, signed the paperwork while drinking complimentary champagne, and had it delivered to a very specific address with a note, "For when the Uber surge is too high." Then I went to the lawyer. By 4:47 p.m., the $8 million acquisition deal was finalized. The best part wasn't the money, it was walking into rooms that once made me shrink, and realizing I didn't bend anymore. I wasn't proving anything to Adrian. I was proving everything to myself. The consulting contract was signed. I celebrated by wiring $50,000 To every nurse who'd ever covered a shift for me without complaining, their group chat exploded with crying emojis and promises to name their firstborns after me. At 7 p.m., I changed into the midnight blue gown I'd overnighted from Bergdorf's, had my hair and makeup done at the hotel salon, and called the town car. Destination: the annual St. Gabriel's Hospital Foundation Gala. Adrian's hospital, Celeste's social kingdom. Their last piece of perceived territory. I'd bought table 1 for $100,000 that morning, the head table, the power seat. I arrived fashionably late. Flashes erupted the second I stepped onto the red carpet. I wasn't famous, but I looked like wealth, and in this city, that's enough to trigger paparazzi instincts. A local reporter asked who I was. I smiled. A very satisfied former employee. Inside, the ballroom glittered with doctors in tuxes, donors dripping diamonds, and board members congratulating themselves. And then I saw them. Adrian in a rental tux 2 sizes too big. Celeste in the same purple mother-of-the-groom dress she'd worn to my wedding. They were desperately trying to charm the chief of surgery, who kept checking his watch like he was timing an escape. Then their eyes found me. Adrian went corpse white. Celeste grabbed a waiter for balance. I walked toward them, the 7-carat diamond around my neck, catching every light like a weapon. "Evening," I said brightly. "Beautiful event this year." Adrian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Celeste found her voice first. "How dare you show your face here?" I lifted one hand. The room fell silent. People love drama, especially when it's expensive. "Actually, Celeste, I was invited. In fact, I bought the head table. But don't worry, I saved 2 seats for you. Right next to the CEO. I gestured. Dr. Patel, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, the same man who once wrote me a glowing recommendation, was already approaching with a curious smile. "Lila Warren," he boomed, kissing my cheeks. "Congratulations are in order. An $8 million exit before age 35. Remarkable." Adrian looked like he'd been physically struck. Celeste squeaked. I smiled warmly. "Thank you, Dr. Patel. And actually, I'm here for one more announcement." I stepped up to the microphone meant for the keynote speaker. The MC didn't hesitate. The size of my donation had made me royalty for the evening. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, voice steady and sure. 5 years ago, I was a staff nurse, working back-to-back shifts to pay rent on an apartment I owned outright, while certain people lived comfortably at my expense. A ripple went through the crowd. Phones came out. People leaned in. Everyone loves a confession when it isn't theirs. Tonight, I'm proud to announce the creation of the Lila Warren Foundation. Gasps, whispers, a collective inhale. Starting tomorrow, we will fully fund nursing scholarships, mental health stipends, and housing grants for any nurse in this state who has ever been taken advantage of by a partner, a landlord, or a system that treats them like disposable labor. The applause began slowly, then roared to life, and across the room, Adrian and Celeste stood frozen, witnesses to the empire I'd built from the ashes they'd handed me. The applause began as a polite ripple, then detonated into a roar that shook the chandeliers. I lifted an envelope high enough for the spotlight to catch it. And to kick things off, I said, "I'm donating $5 million tonight." The ballroom erupted. People stood. People screamed. And I stared directly at Adrian and Celeste, the 2 experts who had unintentionally taught me everything about financial survival. "My soon-to-be ex-husband and his mother," I announced brightly, Inspired this moment, truly, this one is for them. I dropped the mic, literally. The orchestra scrambled into something triumphant as security escorted Adrian and Celeste out through a side door. Later, I heard Celeste tried to slap a reporter on her way out and missed on camera. The clip went viral before I even reached my car. In the back seat of the Rolls, Yes delivered it to the venue with a massive bow. One of the women he cheated with must have finally gotten the email, because my phone buzzed with a message from Kira, the Miami proposal girl. I dumped him. He's crying in my driveway with no shoes. Thanks for the heads up. I laughed so hard the driver asked if I needed medical attention. I didn't. There was only one loose end left, waiting for me 30,000 feet above the Pacific the next morning. The plane lifted out of SFO at dawn, chasing the sun west. First class, seat 1A. I had the entire row to myself. The flight attendant kept refilling my champagne without a word, like she sensed this wasn't any random getaway. This was a rebirth disguised as a boarding pass. It was a one-way ticket to a life I couldn't even imagine 5 years ago. Before we crossed the date line, I opened my laptop one last time. There it was, an email from the title company. The apartment had officially closed at 9 a.m. Pacific. $1.38 million now sat safely in a Cayman account, protected by 2 trusts and a foundation Adrian would never be able to sniff. Another email, the Rolls-Royce, officially re-registered under the St. Gabriel Nurses Relief Fund, meaning every exhausted nurse pulling a 16-hour shift now had a free luxury ride home. And Adrian? He'd see the car every time he opened his Uber app. The first time one of his colleagues got in and realized whose car it was, the dashcam footage hit the group chats within minutes. I closed my laptop and stared out at the endless glittering Pacific. Then I opened a new document, the final task, 1 page, 1 photograph, 1 truth. Subject line, for Adrian, read when you're ready to understand. The message was simple. Adrian, by the time you read this, I'll be somewhere you cannot follow. I'm not writing to hurt you. I'm writing because I finally understand why I stayed so long. I thought love meant carrying someone until they could stand. I believed that if I worked hard enough, forgave enough, poured enough of myself into you, you'd eventually turn around and see me. You never did. But I see myself now. The apartment wasn't the only thing I sold. I sold every piece of jewelry you ever gave me, every apology necklace, every I'll do better bracelet. The pawn tickets are attached, total $11,400. I donated it to a domestic violence shelter that helps women leave men like you. I sold the wedding dress too. A theater student bought it for a production of Gone Girl. Poetic, really. I even sold that stupid limited edition Xbox you made me camp out for on Black Friday. Some 14-year-old in Ohio is thrilled. Everything you ever touched is gone. And everything that's mine now, you will never touch again. You once told me I'd be nothing without you. Turns out I was everything without you. I just had to stop paying your bills long enough to notice. I don't hate you. I don't think about you. That's the difference between us. Goodbye, Adrian. Lila. P.S. The attached photo is the view from my new balcony. You always said we'd have an ocean view someday. Someday is today. I attached the sunrise photo I'd taken from the terrace of the house I'd bought in complete silence 3 weeks earlier. A cliffside villa on the southern edge of Bali. All glass and teak with an infinity pool that didn't end so much as disappear into the Indian Ocean. A cash purchase under the foundation's name. untouchable, untraceable, unreachable to anyone who ever tried to shrink me. Then I powered off my phone, removed the SIM card, and dropped it into my champagne flute. The flight attendant paused mid-pour, wide-eyed, as I raised my glass to the horizon and let the bubbles swallow the last shard of my old life. 14 hours later, my plane touched down in Denpasar. A driver waited at the gate, holding a sign that read, "Selamat datang Ibu Lila, welcome home, Madame Lila." The drive to the villa wound through emerald rice terraces, past temples draped in frangipani, past families piled on motorbikes, waving like I was returning royalty. When we arrived, the villa gates parted like a curtain rising. 6 staff members stood in a neat line, offering flower garlands and chilled towels. The house manager, a serene woman named Wayan, bowed softly. "Everything is ready, Ibu. The infinity pool is warm, dinner is prepared, and the office has the fastest internet on the island, just as you asked." I laughed, an unrestrained, echoing sound that bounced off the volcanic stone. I walked through the villa, past the sunken living room, past the open-air kitchen, past a life I no longer needed to pretend to fit into, and stopped at the pool's edge. Before me, nothing but ocean, no borders, no noise, no one telling me who to be or how small to make myself. I slipped off my shoes, let the silk dress fall from my shoulders, and dove in. I floated on my back, staring at the first stars appearing, and for a moment, just one, the peace cracked. Because floating there, weightless and warm, my mind betrayed me with a memory I hadn't invited. Not the big betrayals, those were easy to leave behind. It was the small one that cut deepest. The night I came home after a 14-hour shift, hands trembling from fatigue, and he didn't even look up from his game long enough to ask if I was okay. He just pointed at the sink and said, "You missed a spot." I remember standing there, still in my scrubs, smelling like disinfectant and despair, thinking, is this all I am to him? That was the night I washed a dish with one hand, and quietly packed away the last of my hope with the other. Remembering it now didn't break the moment, it sharpened it. Because the ocean wasn't just warm, it was clean. And I realized I wasn't floating to escape my past. I was floating because I had finally risen above it. No more night shifts, no more alarms, no more funding someone else's ego or holding myself together while a man fell apart. Just waves, just breath, just a heartbeat that finally belonged to me. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt the truth settle into my bones. Somewhere across the world, Adrian was probably hunched in his mother's spare room, refreshing an inbox that would stay empty forever. Meanwhile, I was 35 years old, with $8 million, a foundation that would change thousands of lives, a villa with my name on the gate, and an entire ocean stretching out like a promise meant only for me. I closed my eyes and let the current rock me, soft, slow, certain. The story wasn't ending, no. The story was finally, beautifully beginning. Lila's journey wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. She walked through betrayal, rebuilt herself in silence, and rose higher than anyone who tried to break her. She turned humiliation into strategy, heartbreak into leverage, and every dollar stolen into a future no one could touch. Her escape wasn't about running away. It was about running toward the life she always deserved. And standing on the edge of that infinity pool, wrapped in starlight and freedom, she proved the one truth every survivor eventually learns. You don't need closure from the person who hurt you. You just need the courage to close the door yourself. Her story may have reached its final page, but her new life, that's a saga only just unfolding. And somewhere, not far from that warm Bali shore, another story is waiting, another betrayal, another quiet rise, another woman ready to step into her own power. But that's a tale for another video. Whenever you're ready, I'll tell you everything.